thought, now that you've gotten a little bit of a history lesson, we thought we would put together, Rudy and I, because the playoff committee is going to be putting out their first batch of rankings this week coming up after this weekend. Rudy, do you want to go first with your prediction? Or do you want me to go first?
Up to you, because my explanation's a little, weirder in terms of what I think the playoff committee will do differently than when they had a 14 playoff. So if yours is more conventional, go with yours, and mine just kind of like the wild card.
Okay, so just to give you an explanation, I'm going to explain how I picked my teams, how I got to where I was getting. So here is where I put each of the teams. So the way I basically did this is I got super nerdy this week and I went through week 10, 11, and 12, and then the championship series. And I basically said, where do these teams stack up against each other and who will win? And so basically, I have Boise State at, well, I'll start from the top to the bottom because I think that's easier. So in my opinion, I think Oregon is going to outright win their season and win the championship. So in my mind, I think that the best odds and the best team to make the playoff is Oregon. I don't think they're going to lose. I don't see them losing. Next, I have Georgia in the SEC outright winning the rest of their games. Again, I'm not saying these are guaranteed, but in my to this moment, if you were like Chris, you have to pick today the teams and where they're going to go. These are where I'm picking them. So I think Georgia will outright win and win the SEC championship. In the third spot, in the what do they call that again? In the third seed, I have Miami winning out because realistically, you just saw it. There's a 90% chance for us to win out, and I think we will also win the championship, the ACC championship. Now, I know some of you who are cheering for Clemson are going to say, "But Clemson is such a good team. What about Clemson?" I'm just going to say one quick thing. We beat Clemson last year with a freshman quarterback. Even if they got doubly better, we got exponentially better. And if you do the maths. There should be no reason why we lose to Clemson because again, we beat them with a freshman last year. So I'm pretty sure we're going to beat them this year if we meet them in Charlotte. Anyways, the fourth seed I have BYU because I do think BYU will win out in the Big 12. They'll stay undefeated and then they will beat who I presume will be Iowa State in the championship. I just don't see them stopping. They're a really powerful team and they've been going out. Now, here's where we get into the trickiness, right? Seeds 5 through 12, okay? So, what I think the playoff committee is going to do is they're going to take the loser of the SEC team of the SEC championship and they're going to put them in the 5th seed. So, I think Texas will win out but lose the conference championship, but like I said, the committee will show preference and reverence to the SEC loser and put them in the 5th seed. The same thing will occur with the loser of the Big 12 champ or Big 10 championship. So I think OSU will continue to win out their games as they'll win, like we said, this weekend against Penn State, but lose in the conference championship. Now, the hard thing is I don't know how strong this will last because OSU is down those two O linemen we were talking about, and they're a little bruised and battered. So this could change. And I think, Rudy, we should probably do this every week, seeing how the teams go. Number
Absolutely.
7, I have Notre Dame because I think Notre Dame will win out the rest of their games. Their schedule is very manageable, and the voters love Notre Dame for whatever god awful reason. So I think they'll be the next in line for that 7th seed. They're going to be probably one of the better looking one loss teams, especially with that win over Texas A&M and Texas A&M looking as strong as they do. At number 8, I have Penn State sneaking in because they're going to lose this weekend most likely to Ohio State, which is going to push them out of the Big Ten championship. So they'll only have one loss, and hopefully they play close. That will give them some credence and credit to get in. And again, you've already got the Big Ten and the SEC championship runner ups in there. So what would be next? Oh, look at these balloons, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Next, I have Clemson at number 9 because I think they will win out the season as well, but lose to Miami, like I mentioned, in the ACC championships. And it'll be hard to keep out Clemson, whose only two losses are to Georgia, which would be the SEC champion, and the ACC champion in Miami. At number 10, I have Tennessee, who I think will lose to Georgia in week 12 and only have two losses as well, and will be in similar position to Penn State, but in the SEC and have them ranked at number 9 because of other losses that occur in the final 2 weeks. So we have to remember just because you're ranked at a certain number doesn't mean you'll be seated at a certain number. The rankings and the seedings will go into that. And then I have Texas A&M at 11 because I think their only loss for the remaining this season will be the first one against Notre Dame, who we mentioned we have at number 7, and then we have the number 5 team or fifth seed team, which will be Texas. Those will be the only two losses, and I think they're going to play Texas relatively close. And then rounding us out, we have Boise State, the Group of 5 champion. I can't put them anywhere higher than 12 because there's just too many good teams that I think would just blow them out. So then when you get into those, that the first round, you'll have Boise State playing Texas. I think Texas will win that game to play BYU. Clemson playing Penn State. I think Clemson will beat Penn State to play Georgia. Texas will beat Texas A&M will beat Ohio. Ohio State will beat Texas A&M. Tennessee will beat Notre Dame. And then you get into the quarterfinals where I think Texas will make it to the semis. Georgia will beat out Clemson. I think we will get revenge for the Fiesta Bowl and beat out Ohio State. And I think Oregon will cruise past Tennessee, leaving the championship between Miami and Georgia. And of course, it's all about the U, baby. It's all about the U. What about you, Rudy? Let's see your uh your bracket. What do you got? How did you get to this?
So bear with me. I think the way that you put your bracket together is exactly the way that the committee has thought the last few years with only 4 teams. My thought is, given the state of college football this year and given how the competition has kind of shook itself out, I almost see the committee doing something different with an expanded 12-team playoff. So I have Oregon as the number 1 team because I think they're going to run the table and they're going to win the Big Ten. I also think they're going to beat Ohio State for the second time in the season. So that's why they're number 1, undefeated conference champion number 1. I put Miami at number 2 because they'll be also an undefeated conference champion. I have them meeting up against Clemson and Charlotte, beating Clemson, and because they're undefeated, they'll be number 2. I have Georgia at 3 because they'll be the SEC champion. They have 1 loss on their record, and I think that's where it's going to stay because I expect them to beat Texas A&M in the SEC championship game. BYU, I have it 4th as the Big 12 champion. I believe they'll be undefeated in conference as well. And that gets rid of your conference scheduling for your Power 4. And that's why I have them 1 through 4. From there, I'm thinking the committee is probably going to try to increase some competition by saying if you have good and a good independent, and Notre Dame, I think at this point, they had that 1 loss to NIU. I don't think they're dropping another game the rest of their season. They're going to end up at number 5. That's why I put them there because they'll be ranked higher than a 1 loss non conference champion or a 2 loss non conference champion. Boise State, I put at 6, not because I think they're the number 6 best team in the country. It's because they are the group of 5 highest ranked champion who's going to only have 1 loss to Oregon. So I think they run the table. And even though they're in the group of 5, they'll get a higher ranking because of their, record. I have Texas A&M at 7 because I actually think they beat Texas at the end of the year because they're actually hosting them in Aggieland. And I think
Yeah.
after the last time they had Notre Dame come in there and beat them, I don't think they're dropping another game at home the rest of the year. So I think they beat Texas in that one. That's why they end up 7. Ohio State, I put at 8 because they'll have 2 losses, both of them to Oregon. And that's where you're going to put your 2-loss conference runner up. Clemson, similar idea, 2-loss conference runner up, only 1 loss in conference to Miami. I have Indiana making the college football
Ooh.
playoff at 10.
That's
And
what
that's
threw
only,
me off. That was a curveball for me.
yeah, it's a curveball for me too. But I was looking at their schedule and I'm saying there's a possibility they probably lose like that 1 game to Ohio
Ohio
State
State.
this
Yep.
year.
I agree.
And given the way that that plays out, I don't think they make it to the Big Ten championship game with that 1 loss. But also, how can you deny a 1-loss, 3rd place Power 4 conference team a spot in the playoff? So that's why I have them there. And with that same example, that's why I have Penn State at 11. So in this setup with the top 12 teams, the Big Ten gets the most bids into the college football playoff, not the SEC like everyone would think. And then SEC, I have Texas at 12 because they'll have 2 losses in conference. They're probably not going to make the conference championship game. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, they're not going to make the SEC championship game. So there'll be 2 losses, but they've had some great wins on their resume this year. So surprisingly, on both of our lists, Alabama's not in this picture because they're effectively done. I don't have Tennessee on that list because I believe Tennessee's dropping another game, and I believe it's to one of those teams that's making the top 12. So
Yeah.
that's how I seeded my 12. And then the way I have the action working from there, 12 plays 5 first round. So I have Texas beating Notre Dame because even
Yeah.
though they're ranked higher, I think they're a stronger team. And because it's that, 5 through 12 side, these are the first games that are taking place on college campuses. So imagine Notre Dame hosting a college football playoff game. going to be insanity, and they're going to all leave crying in front of touchdown Jesus because the Aggies are going to take them out.
Be
I
amazing.
have Ohio State over Clemson, not only as the home team in the horseshoe, but also because I just think they're the better team in terms of what Clemson has done this year. Yes, they've trended better, but at the same time, uh, having two losses to two power conference teams, I just expect Ohio State to be healthy and win that game. In a similar vein, because Boise State's the higher ranked team in my rankings, I have Penn State going to Boise, playing on the Smurf turf for
Ooh,
a first round college football playoff game. So
exciting.
imagine that. Imagine like a thrilling crowd of like 43,000 in Boise, Idaho in December. And Penn State comes in, who's used to playing in the snow. It'll be a whiteout out there, but they still get the job done because they're the higher ranked power conference team. And then I have Texas A&M over Indiana in that first round as well. Going into the quarterfinals, I'm keeping Texas's train rolling. They're beating BYU. Ohio
Ooh,
State is going to get their revenge over Oregon. I have this big one here because in this scenario that I have, how hard is it to beat a team not once, but twice, and now ask them to do it a third time?
yeah,
Oregon did it in the regular season. They did it in the Big Ten championship game. But to do it a third time is, it's near impossible. The closest thing that we've seen is Miami beating Florida State three times in a calendar year, where they did it in the 2003 regular
yeah,
season, 2004 Orange Bowl, then season opener 2004 regular season.
yeah.
So I don't think that happens again. Then I have Georgia over Penn State, and I have Miami over Texas A&M. We played them last year. We're going to play them again this year, and that's the way I see that one going. I'm also a homer. We're both Miami fans, as you all can see. The semifinal, I get Ohio State over Texas. So Ohio State, from an 8 seed, makes the national
That's
championship game. They ride
interesting.
that wave over Oregon. And I have Miami over Georgia because if you look at that matchup now, let's be honest, Miami does have some defensive issues, but Georgia is not the most prolific offense, as we talked about earlier today. They're probably going to have to try to throw the ball to beat us, which very familiar foes at wide receiver at Georgia. And Miami's offense, who's stopping that offense? Not that team. So I have
Yeah.
the final being a rematch of the 2003 Fiesta Bowl later on in the playoff. And I have Miami winning the national championship as a homer over Ohio State.
Yeah, I think that's a great bracket. I thought what was really cool about both of our brackets is the amount of explosive games. I just think the marquee games that we can get out of this, as much as like I was kind of against them expanding it, just because, not in the sense that I don't want 12 teams. I think 12 teams is a great number, but it was almost immediate where they were like, oh, 12, now we're going to go to 14 2 years later. And I think that's kind of inevitable what's going to happen. And I don't want to see it blow up to being like March Madness, because I think that's the beauty of college football, is that the season actually matters, whereas in college basketball, the season is kind of irrelevant. Um, but I love the marquee matchups that we had, and I what I did not realize was going to play such a factor until we did that story a few weeks ago, was the impact of NIL and the transfer portal affecting depth on these teams. Because you got to think, like, again, Ohio State is down two linemen. What are the chances that they get one of them back, even at like 80%, and then can continue to make a run through the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs? Because you're looking at playing at a minimum, even if you get that first week bye, you still got to play 3 games to win a championship. Whereas in years past, you only had to win one, and then when we went to the playoff system, it was two. So you think about that, and you're like, man, I wonder how this is going to work out. And you think about them going to a 14 team. I think after this year and maybe one more year, I think the SEC and the Big Ten may rethink that 14, because then you have to add another, you know, stage in the playoffs, and I just don't know if teams are going to be able to go that deep for that long without having the depth that they used to have, because a lot of these teams, I don't see them being the high, if they're a fully functioning like high power offense or defense, being the same team in week 10 or 11 as they're going to be in the semis. I think there will
Yeah.
just be, it'll just be too much wear and tear on their bodies. But
The one thing I didn't like about this whole expanded 12-team playoff is that I thought they needed to get rid of at least one or two regular season games. Because the fact they're playing 12 regular season games now, plus a conference championship game, and then possibly an additional 2 to 3 college football playoff games, that's insanity for that. Uh, One, for the conditioning, and two, just as you mentioned, their bodies aren't able to take that. It's an NFL schedule. at that
It
point.
is an NFL. It is an NFL schedule, and then you're also expected to go to school, which is I don't even know. Like I just think of the logistics, and it makes my head explode and my nose bleed because I'm just like, how do